There comes a moment in a man's life when the pain, the hurt, and the silence become too loud to ignore. He finally accepts that the woman he once adored, the one who once felt like home, no longer exists, not in the way he remembers her. She's gone, not physically, but emotionally. The sparkle in her eyes when she looked at him, the softness in her voice when she said his name, the way she used to care, vanished. It hurts. But the truth? She left long before she actually walked away. There comes a point when a man realizes that the woman he once held close, the woman who once made the world feel safe, simply isn't there anymore. Not in spirit, not in heart. He doesn't just wake up one day and stop loving her. No, it happens slowly. The woman who once laughed at his jokes, who used to call just to hear his voice, who once stood by his side with loyalty in her eyes, she's no longer there. That version of her, the one he fell for, has disappeared. What remains is someone else entirely. Someone who now looks through him instead of into him. And that stings more than any argument ever could. But you see, what truly shatters a man isn't her absence. It's the shift, the change in her energy, the feeling that she's still around, yet miles away emotionally. Her body stays. Her words might still come, but her presence? That's gone. The warmth in her touch, the genuine interest in his thoughts, the respect in her tone, it all fades. And the man is left wondering if she ever truly saw him at all. So he begins to detach. He doesn't rage. He doesn't beg. He simply starts to reclaim himself. The woman he loved no longer exists. And once he accepts that, something inside him clicks. He sees clearly. He stops chasing a ghost. He lets go of the image of her that only existed in his memory. And that is when he begins to heal. He poured every ounce of himself into her. Every late-night conversation, every silent prayer, every small act of love that went unnoticed, he gave it all. Not because he was weak, not because he was desperate, but because that's what a man does when he loves deeply. He doesn't hold back. He gives her his heart, his loyalty, his time, even when she stopped appreciating it. Even when her responses turned cold, he stayed. He offered her all of who he was, his thoughts, his dreams, his peace. Not to earn her approval, but because he believed in the connection they shared. He stood by her, even when it felt like she was slowly slipping away. He didn't withdraw at the first sign of her distance. He leaned in. He tried harder. He thought that if he just gave more of himself, maybe she'd see the man standing in front of her. But she didn't. Or maybe she just chose not to. She had his loyalty, even when her interest began to fade. He stayed faithful, even when her energy shifted. She didn't have to ask. He was there, always. Supporting her, uplifting her, showing up. And in return, she gave him breadcrumbs. An occasional smile. A half-hearted message. Affection that felt forced. He didn't want much. Just honesty. Just effort. Just the version of her that once cared. But the more he gave, the more empty he became. It's a strange kind of ache. Giving someone your all, only to realize it was never enough. Not because he lacked anything, but because she stopped valuing what he brought. She had a man who would have carried the weight of the world for her. And still, she drifted. Still, she made him feel invisible. And when there was nothing left to give, when his soul was tired and his heart worn down, he didn't explode. He didn't lash out. He simply withdrew. Quietly. Completely. Because even a strong man breaks when he's poured from a cup that's never refilled. And then, he just stopped reaching out. No more good morning texts. No more checking in. No more asking if she was okay. He didn't announce it. He didn't give a dramatic speech. He simply went quiet. And in that stillness, something shifted. She noticed. At first, it was subtle. A pause in her routine. A moment of looking at her phone and realizing his name wasn't there. A space that used to be filled with his presence suddenly felt heavy with absence. She didn't expect it. She thought he'd always be around, thought his patience had no end, thought he'd keep waiting. But he didn't, because something inside him had changed. He realized that love isn't proven by how much pain you can endure. He learned that loyalty should never come at the cost of your own peace. And that's what she had taken from him, his peace, his calm, his fire. So he took it back, not to hurt her, but to heal himself. And in that silence, she started to hear everything she had ignored. She began to feel the weight of what she lost. Not just a man, but a presence. A calm, steady, masculine energy that made her feel safe without even trying. A man who asked for nothing but gave everything. A man who didn't just listen, but understood. Now, the silence echoed. In her room, in her heart. In those moments where she used to feel his warmth, now she felt cold. Not because he hated her, but because he finally loved himself enough to walk away. She didn't grasp the truth at first. The silence felt like confusion, maybe even a test. She told herself he'd come back, that he was just busy, that he needed space. But days passed, then weeks, and the stillness didn't break. That's when reality began to sink in. He was really gone, and not in an angry, bitter kind of way. Not in a way that demanded closure or revenge. He just left quietly, completely, and without turning around. And that, somehow, hurt more than any fight ever could. Because the absence was clean, pure, undeniable. She started to feel the loss in places she didn't expect. In songs they used to share, in the shows they watched together, in the late nights when her thoughts became too loud. She felt it in the reflection of her own choices. She remembered all the times he had tried, all the times he stayed silent just to keep peace, all the moments he put her first while she barely noticed. And now she couldn't escape the mirror he left behind, a mirror that showed her not just who he was, but who she had been. Dismissive, cold, caught up in her own world, expecting him to orbit around it forever. But he had stepped out of her gravity. And in doing so, he reminded her, sometimes it's not the loud exit that breaks a woman. It's the quiet withdrawal of a man who finally realized his worth. There's something unforgettable about a man who leaves without bitterness. A man who doesn't burn bridges, who doesn't shout or plead, but simply walks away with his dignity intact. That kind of departure echoes. It doesn't just vanish, it lingers in the silence he leaves behind. She begins to remember not just the man, but the presence, his steadiness, his calm, the way he didn't need to control the room because he had already mastered himself. He never begged for love. He never demanded attention. He gave it all freely, until he didn't. And now, that silence becomes a reminder of what she once had and never truly valued. His absence now speaks volumes. It reflects her own inconsistency, her inability to appreciate his quiet strength when he stood before her every day, unwavering and present. Because a man like that doesn't need to announce his worth. His energy speaks before he does. And when he goes quiet, really quiet, it's never out of spite. It's because he's done explaining what should have been seen and felt all along. He didn't leave to punish her. He left to preserve himself. And in doing so, he became the man she will measure every other against. Not because he was perfect, but because when he finally chose himself, he reminded her of the kind of love she lost by taking a good man for granted. Eventually, it hits her. What she lost wasn't just a man, but the safety of being seen without judgment, the comfort of being loved without games. She starts to see that what she mistook for ordinary was actually rare, that the silence wasn't cold, it was clarity. And his walking away wasn't abandonment. It was self-respect. That realization doesn't come all at once. It creeps in, during quiet nights when no one texts back, in the arms of someone who doesn't quite get her. In the mirror, when she sees a version of herself that no longer glows the way she did when he was around. She starts to see the pattern, the way she pushed away the one who asked for nothing but gave everything. And then she realizes, he never stopped being the man. She simply stopped seeing it. He didn't disappear. He just returned to himself. And now, she's left with a silence that speaks louder than words. A memory that won't fade. And a lesson etched deep in her heart. That not all men are replaceable. That some losses aren't temporary. Some departures don't come back around. She'll learn that the strongest form of love is the one that can walk away when it's no longer received with the same grace it gives. And that sometimes, the one who left was the one who loved the most. Not because he stopped caring, but because he finally cared enough. For himself. She might scroll through old messages. She might replay old conversations in her head, wondering when things started to shift. She'll feel the ache of his absence not just in moments of silence, but in the parts of her that used to feel full when he was around. And maybe, just maybe, she'll realize it wasn't that he stopped caring, it was that he stopped chasing. Because the man who once gave her all his attention, now gives it to his purpose. The one who used to wait for her replies, no longer needs her validation. And the silence she once took for granted has now become the very thing that haunts her. That's the thing about detachment. It doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It just walks away quietly and lets its absence speak all the words that were never said.